marketplace.
All right, as the president is answering questions here, he's touched on the majority of his priorities in this budget. He's touched on clean energy, he's touched on health care reform, and he's touched on education. But there was a challenge that he issued to the Republicans, not just to come forward and say no on this big budget, but to come up with some ideas on their own. Now they're meeting that challenge right now. The House Republican leader, John Boehner, is holding a news conference where they're talking about the Republican road to recovery, their own alternate budget. We want to listen to this.
In those cases where we have to disagree with the president, we believe it is our obligation to offer a better solution if we're in disagreement. And with that, let me turn it over to Eric Cantor, our whip.
Thanks, Lee. Good morning. As the leader said, we are here today because, yes, we do have a plan. We have ideas, and we directly challenge the administration and Speaker Pelosi to work with us on behalf of all Americans. Today's Republican road to recovery is the latest in a series of GOP initiatives, solutions, and plans. As you know, we had yesterday a rollout of our housing plan. We had a stimulus plan. We will have a health care plan. We will have an energy plan. Because we want to pull the agenda that this administration is pushing back away from such a radical attempt to depart from the mainstream back to the middle on behalf of all Americans and the problems that they're facing. And you know what's interesting? This administration ran a successful campaign before it was inaugurated into office. This president ran a successful campaign in the middle. But this administration has moved so far to the left, working in tandem with groups like MoveOn.org to ambush and strong-arm Democrats and Republican members of Congress. No one in either party deserves that. In just under 90 days, this administration has moved away from honest and open debate and has become more ideological in its attempts to run through trillions of dollars of additional spending and racking up record levels of debt. We are living in far too important of a time for this type of behavior. The American people deserve better. They deserve to see how their taxpayer dollars are being spent, and we are here to say we are ready to work on their behalf. Thank you.
We believe we must offer our employers, the American people, two basic things: the truth about what's going on here in Washington and a choice about how we would do things differently. And what we are doing is we are taking those principles, the principles that built America, and applying them to the problems of the day and offering bold and innovative solutions to our problems. This is a broad economic recovery plan on how we would manage and how we would bring jobs back to the economy, how we would govern differently. A component of this will be offered in detail next Wednesday on the House floor when we bring our alternative budget, the actual budget that Republicans stand for as an alternative difference to the Obama budget. We marked up the budget last night. The budget last night, as the Democrats in the markup said repeatedly, is the Obama budget. It's a budget that is so reckless, so irresponsible, that must be opposed. It's a budget that doubles the national debt in 5.5 years and triples it in 10.5 years. It's a budget that increases our borrowing and our national debt under this presidency more than all prior presidencies. It's a budget that seeks to impose a $1.9 trillion tax increase on the American economy, on all taxpayers, on all energy consumers in the middle of a recession. It's a budget that promises a gusher of new spending, followed by a gusher of new borrowing that we simply cannot sustain. And so we're going to say we would not do this. We would do things differently. So while we criticize, we propose. We've done that on stimulus. We're doing that on a number of issues. This is what we think is the best way to get our economy out of the ditch. And next Wednesday, we're going to go to the Congress, to the people, with a budget that does not recklessly mortgage our children's future, that gets our borrowing under control, that does not pursue a gusher of new and frivolous spending, and that does not raise taxes on the American people, on small businesses, on people with savings plans in the middle of a recession. We're going to show a leaner budget, a budget with lower taxes, lower spending, and lower borrowing. And it's going to be a budget that says, here's how best to get America out of this struggling economy, and here's how best to preserve the legacy of the American dream, the legacy of this country, which is to leave the next generation better off. Unfortunately, the economic agenda of this administration and the budget of this Congress and this administration severs that legacy that every generation has until now maintained, which is to leave the next generation better off. We intend on keeping that legacy, and that's why we're offering these bold alternative ideas.
I do the same thing that many mothers do across this country. I look at my 2-year-old and I wonder, what kind of a world will he have? Who will his friends be? And what will his achievements be? And I wonder, as many hardworking middle-class families do, will my child have the same freedoms and opportunities that we have today? You know, when I was born, my share of the national debt was $1,800. Now, when my son was born, and any child that's born today, their share of the debt is increasing all the time, and with this budget, it's a $30,000 bill. You know, baby gifts used to be pewter cups and blankets and rattles, but what this Congress is giving every baby that is born in this country right now is a $30,000 bill. For their sake and for our next generation's sake, we need to stop this borrowing and spending. We cannot borrow and spend our way into prosperity. We cannot run these trillion-dollar deficits for the next decade and assume that we're going to continue to be a growing, vibrant country. Government programs need to help people, but it's not the government that's the engine that will put this economy back on track. Only the private sector creates real jobs, and that happens with small businesses and mom-and-pop stores, Main Street. We need to be responsible, and we need to make sure that our children and our grandchildren continue to have the freedoms and opportunities that all of us have enjoyed.
After months of runaway spending at the federal level, the American people want us to put our fiscal house in order here in Washington, D.C. Instead of making the same kind of sacrifices and hard choices that millions of Americans are making in small businesses and family farms and around kitchen tables, this administration has offered the most fiscally irresponsible budget in American history. More spending, more government, more bailouts is not a prescription for economic recovery.
All right, here's a number of Republicans from the House of Representatives who are coming out and taking on the president's budget again. We were told, we were promised that they were going to offer an alternative. And what we're hearing again is them laying out their criticism of the president's budget. Politico apparently got its hands on what the Republicans are calling the Republican Road to Recovery, outlining a budget. So far, we're not seeing any real numbers attached to this, but they're outlining some priorities here, limiting the federal budget from growing faster than the family budget, providing universal access to health care and securing entitlements, lowering taxes, keeping energy and fuel costs low, ending the bailouts and reforming the financial system and keeping the cost of living low. But again, so far in this news conference, we're not hearing any specifics on how they plan to accomplish that. We'll keep listening. If we find out that there are some details out of this news conference, we'll bring them to you. Right now on MSNBC, we're following several breaking weather stories. Take a look.